We're going over System Pticha, Preface to the Wisdom of Kabbalah by Bala Sulam, Chapter 2, 5 Discernments in the Masach. Session 12, Individuals' Phases, Parts of Perception. 5 phases in the individual.
Five phases in the individual. Baal HaSalam. Item 20. The 5 discernments of perception in Bechina Dalet, Phase 4, are called by the names of the Sephirot, Keter Hakma Bina Teferet Malkut, crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, kingdom. This is so because prior to the Zimzum restriction, while Bechina Dalet, Phase 4, was still the vessel of reception for the 10 Sephirot, emanations, included in the upper light by way of He is one and His name is one, since all the worlds were included there, its clothing of the 10 Sephirot emanations in that place followed these 5 Behinot phases. Each Bechina phase of the 5 Behinot phases in her clothes its corresponding Bechina phase in the 10 Sephirot emanations in the upper light. Explanation, item 20. The 5 phases of perception included in the individual phase before the barrier are called preparation, crown, humanity, wisdom, spiritual society, understanding, group, beauty, and individual kingdom. This is so because before the barrier, first restriction, the person perceives through the focal point of phase 4 kingdom. This state of perception is still controlled by reality by the way of He and His name are one. All the components of perception are included there, intercepting the 5 parts of reality. Each phase of the 5 phases in the person manages its matching phase in the 10 levels of attention, emanations in reality.
5 phases in the individual. Explanation. Item 20. The 5 phases of perception included in the individual phase before the barrier are called preparation, crown, humanity, wisdom, spiritual society, understanding, group, beauty, and individual, kingdom. This is so because before the barrier, first restriction, the person perceives through the focal point of phase 4, kingdom. So what we can see here, when we're looking at the phase 4 of the individual, he has 5 parts within him of perception. You've got Keter, which we said is crown, which is the preparation, the root phase. We've got Chochma, which is humanity, which is wisdom, phase 1. We've got Bina, which is the spiritual society, understanding, phase 2. Tiferet, the group, beauty, phase 3. And Malchut, the individual, kingdom, phase 4.
How does perceiving things through the vocal point of the individual state of phase 4 affect our perception of the other phases?
So the idea is that when you're, let's say, in the previous phases, let's say you're in humanity, you think of yourself as another human along humanity, and sort of you have to get along with humans. Then you shift to the spiritual society, and then you've got a 2-part relationship. You've still got your relationship with humanity, but now you've also got to deal with the spiritual side of humanity and do connection and understand that the solution of problems is not in money, honor, and knowledge, but rather in connection. And you're trying to educate humanity in connection. Then you reach phase 3, which is the group. Then your understanding is that the problem is not the connection. Connection is a result. So what's the cause? The cause is internal power. They're lacking internal power. And if they have the internal power, they'll have connection. And if they have a connection, then they'll have money, honor, and knowledge. Then you reach phase 4, and then you understand that not only do you need internal power, but that internal power has to be egoistic, that it has to be internal, that it has to be you have to be so focused on you receiving internal power, on full egoism for it to work. And that if you're sort of trying to do this idea of, I'll help others cross the barrier and I'll be a little altruistic, if you're not fully egoistic, you won't able to use all your energy of your egoism to able to cross the barrier. And you go through these different phases. So depending on which phase you're in, your relationship to the other phases will be different. If you're in humanity, you think that the solution is, education, basically, of money, honor, and knowledge. And if you are in the spiritual society, you think the problem is connection between humans, and you reach the group and you understand that the problem is internal power. And then you reach the individual, you're like, yeah, but it has to be egoistic.
You say at the individual, it has to be egoistic to get across the barrier, right?
Exactly. If you're spending any energy on anybody else spiritually, but yourself, then you can't cross the barrier. You need to be focused on yourself and on yourself alone.
But you're also at the same time creating your internal power by using bestowal as a filling through your ego.
What do you mean?
In other words, to create the internal power that you are striving for, that you are using I'm kind of confused here, to the state of you got to be egotistical to get across the barrier. But at the same time, you have to start wanting bestowal.
So you have to egoistically want bestowal.
Right. So you have to use that bestowal that you were wanting and needing to create your internal power. You have to use it through your ego.
Exactly. Think of it like this. If you want the quality of bestowal, if you're trying to reach it using bestowal, then why do you need the quality of bestowal? So you have to reach a point when you understand that you have no bestowal at all. And then the only thing that you have, available for you is your ego. So you have to use your full ego in any sort of trying to think that you're doing any kind of bestowal, then, well, why do you need the quality? It's like if you lack the quality, then all you have is your egos, and then you have to fully egoistically want the quality of bestowal. But if you are trying to want the quality of bestowal with bestowal, well, then why do you need the quality if you're already using it? And people don't sort of think that deep. The idea is that if you're wanting the quality, it means you don't have the quality. And if you don't have the quality, then any sort of thinking that you're doing bestowal before the barrier is going to be a facade. It's going to be a lie. Because it's like, what do you want? I want money, right? Let's say, so for example, someone has no money. And they're like, I want money. It's like, how are you going to get money? Oh, by spending money. It's like, you have no money. So you can't, if you don't have money, you can't use money to get money if you don't have money. So the same thing here, you can't reach the quality of bestowal through bestowal if you don't have bestowal. And any thinking that you're able to do bestowal, then you're just using your egoism in a direction that looks like bestowal. And because it's not, the bestowal that we do with our egoism is a less degree of egoism. And therefore, if we're trying to do a bit of bestowal before the barrier, we're reducing the efficiency and the optimal usage of our egoism. So the ego is designed to receive. It's designed to be egoistic. We have to do that to the maximum. Now, the maximum egoism is actually internal, not external. So if I'm controlling people and telling people what to do and stuff like that, that's actually a very low ego because it spans over time. When it's internal, then you get into a state of egoism where you're self-centered, you're constantly thinking of yourself. And that is true egoism, when you're constantly thinking of how you're gaining from everything, and you're thinking of yourself and your reward and what you're going to get out of it. What you want to get out of it is the quality of bestowal, which is the total opposite of egoism. But you have to use your egoism to reach there.
So you actually have to get to the point of where you're using your egoism before the barrier and seeing yourself as the reason that it's there. I mean, how can I put that? Your egoism then is that you have to use it and see yourself as that most important piece.
Exactly. Well, it's not the most important piece. It's the only piece you actually have.
Okay.
Right? So if that's the only piece you have to use it to its maximum efficiency because you have nothing else to actually get you across the barrier. Any goody two-shoes sort of thinking will actually stop you from crossing the barrier. You need to be fully egoistic and wanting it with all your mind and all your heart.
You got to be Donald Trump internally.
Exactly.
So how does that relate to if you're still working in a group of twos?
Diplomacy and tact. Don't let them know.
Exactly.
You can use them to your advantage.
You have to externally behave normal. When we're talking about being egoistic, it's not like walking around and shoving people over. That's actually a lower egoism because you're trying to express it outside. We're talking about directing everything inwards and just creating a power source with your egoism. Every time you spend it, you're basically reducing tension. That's why people, when they get angry, they actually express it externally because it actually reduces the tension. When someone's angry, by getting angry, it actually reduces the tension of the situation. But if they keep that anger inside, if they're directing all their thoughts inward, then it becomes a power source and this huge tension there to actually propel you across the barrier. But if you're spending it and expressing it, then you're reducing the full effectiveness of the ego.
So anytime you express it, then what's happening is you've deflated the balloon.
Exactly. And you need that tension to be able to cross. And so by expressing it, by showing external frustration, even external frustration for not crossing the barrier is wasting that energy that you could actually use to actually intensify yourself to cross the barrier. That's why when you reach that 4.4.2 and 4.4.3, you have to focus on crossing the barrier, especially in 4.4.3, you have to focus on the importance of crossing the barrier and not on why I cannot cross the barrier. Because by focusing on why you can't cross the barrier, you're basically wasting the energy that could be used to push yourself forward.
Rick, at that time I was having massive internal dialogues with myself. Massive, just nonstop internal dialoguing. Reasoning it out, everything, faithing it. Okay.
So when you were dealing with others, then what you were doing is just internalizing, and then later on scrutinizing, making.
I've long had diplomatic skills. I relate to them at where they're at and at their level. But meanwhile, I'm having that internal dialogue with myself as I'm using them to propel me. I'm stepping on them.
All right.
Standing on them.
You're standing on them, but only internally, not externally.
Exactly. It's always be polite and kind and respectful.
What about sort of when you reach end of correction and you've already built all the egoism and internal power? What about when you use expression? Is that sort of using energy, using egoism?
So there it works a little differently because there you're actually bestowing to your egoism. You're bestowing from the creator within you, from the God within you, to the man within you, to the human, to the, from the G to the Echa. So what happens with the light of expression, which is the light of wisdom, or Chokhmah, there you actually grow by the more you use it. It's like practice makes perfect. The more you spend your expression, the more you grow in expression.
But do you get depleted?
No. The more you spend it, the better you become. It's like muscles. The more you build your muscles, the stronger you become. So you could say with the Achab, the more energy you spend, the weaker you become. But with the GE, the more energy you spend, the stronger you become.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I have an overview questions about the sub-phases on phase 4.
Yes.
What are the difference between them and the phases, like, let's say, the phase of the group in phase 4, the sub-phase, and the phase of group in the third phase?
Oh, so the idea is that when you're in phase 4, and we're going to talk about it later in the session, each of these parts are going to manage the phases above it. So for example, when you're in phase 4, what manages the humanity within you? That's Chokhmah, wisdom, phase 1, within phase 4. What manages the spiritual society that you see in your reality? That's the Bina, the understanding of phase 2 within your phase 4. And, we'll talk about it later in the session of sort of the matching between the parts of phase 4 and what they actually deal with outside of them.
Okay.
We'll move forward. He and his name are one. This state of perception is still controlled by reality by the way of he and his name are one. So we went over this last time, we'll go over it again. So the idea is we have hu v'shmo echad, he and his name are one. And the idea is that shmo, his name, in gematria, in numerology, is identical to ratzon, which is desire. So you've got here below, you've got a numerology table. So the idea is that the first word, which is shin, mem, vav, shin is 300, mem is 40, vav is 6, and together they become 346. And then we have ratzon, where resh is 200, tzadi is 90, vav is 6, nun sofit is 50, and together they become 346 as well. And that's the idea of he is the creator within you, and his name, which is the will to receive within you, that's the idea of desire, are one. They unify together. The idea is that your desire is controlled by the creator within you, which at that point is still subconscious. So basically your subconscious controls your consciousness.
It seems that in the letter it's written, the opposite.
What do you mean?
In the letter 20, he said he is one and his name is one.
Oh, so the idea is, okay. So the idea is that there is two ways to express this concept. There's either he and his name are one, or he is one and his name is one. And the difference is that he and his name are one is talking about the state before the barrier, and he is one and his name are one is talking about the state of enter correction.
But in letter 20, it's still before the barrier, no?
Yeah, and it's a mistake there. So it's a mistake that it's written as he is one and his name is one. It's meant to be he and his name are one.
Okay.
Because when we're talking about before the barrier, we're talking about where all you have is your ego.
Yes, I understand the explanation. In session 11, 10, something like that.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah.
Clear to me, and when I read the letter today, it seems to be the opposite. So.
And that's why I sort of, in the explanation, I gave the correct usage, which is he and his name one.
Which is more reasonable,
Yeah. Because you don't have a conscious bestowal part and a conscious reception part. You just have a reception part and your subconscious controls it, and therefore you can't say that you have he is one and his name is one as separate. Rather, he, which is the bestowal within you, controls directly his name, which is the reception with you, and they're both one, unified together.
Yeah.
Now, move along. Components of perception. All the components of perception are included there, intercepting the 5 parts of reality. Each phase of the 5 phases in the person manages its matching phase in the 10 levels of tension, emanations, and reality. So the idea is that in the phase 4, right, so we've expanded this. What we showed before, you've got the root phase, the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. And the sub-phase within phase 4 manage the phases outside of it. So the root phase outside of phase 4 is managed by the root phase within phase 4. The humanity outside is managed by the humanity inside phase 4. The spiritual society outside is managed by the spiritual society element within phase 4. The group, same thing. The group of outside is managed by the group element within phase 4. And then finally, the individual is managed by the sub-individual phase within it. And the reason why we say there's 10 levels, because the idea is that in phase 3 group, which is Tiferet, there are 6. So then basically you've got the root phase, which is Keter, phase 1, which is Chochmah, wisdom. You've got phase 2, which is Bina, understanding. And then in phase 3, you've got Chesed, which is kindness, Gevura, which is judgment. Tiferet, which is beauty, Netzach, which is eternity, Hod, which is majesty, Yesod, foundation. And then finally, phase 4, you've got Malchut, which is kingdom.
You said that in phase 4, that the phase 4 outside of it was controlled by the aspect of the phase 4 within phase 4. Is that like the subconscious?
No, when we're talking about these parts, we're always talking about the conscious parts.
Okay.
Sort of, we're always talking about what we attain, what we feel, and we never sort of talk about the subconscious in a direct way. So even when we're talking about aligning the conscious to the subconscious, it's in order to allow layers of thoughts and emotions in the subconscious to reflect themselves, to reveal themselves into the consciousness. And that's why we call it revelation, because we're allowing our subconscious to feed us into our consciousness more information, more emotions, and more thoughts.
So we're becoming more aware at that point.
Exactly. And that's why the whole path is called revelation, because you're revealing parts that were already in you, but they were hidden in your subconscious. So only when they're revealed in your consciousness can you actually say you've attained them. And while they're still stuck in your subconscious, then you have faith that they exist, and then you have reason when they've been revealed to you. So you could say that if someone hasn't attained yet something, that's why they go to someone who has attained it, so they can actually know how to direct themselves, to have faith above reason, to direct themselves to something that they don't attain yet. And then when they attain it, they can actually talk about it and express it to others. You could say as long as it's just faith for them, they shouldn't be teaching it to others, since they haven't attained it themselves. They're just saying somebody else attained it. So for their own attainment, they go to somebody who has a high attainment, and they have faith in them that they have the higher attainment, and they try to align themselves to that higher phase and reach that phase. Once they've reached that phase, then it's okay for them to teach that phase to others. But if someone's trying to teach phases that they haven't attained yet to other people, then they're basically not actually teaching. They're basically teaching what somebody else knows and not what they know, and therefore they're just going to be regurgitating, expressing what the other person's saying, and not expressing what they've attained and what they feel, and they can't internalize it and innovate and express it in unique ways. They're just going to repeat what somebody else told them to say. That's why we always say attain first, and then you can help others.
Okay, even though you don't have a screen yet in this phase 4, you see you control the humanity differently than what you have been through the phases you've been before?
Definitely. If you're in phase 4, the way you're going to be dealing with the humanity, when you were in phase 1, you were doing with humanity because you were humanity. So you didn't see a difference between yourself and them.
You don't have the screen yet.
That is true, you don't have the screen yet, but you still have a higher perception than them.
Okay, you are after a clean concept and everything.
Yeah, it's like, for example, when you were in the spiritual society, you didn't manage the spiritual society, you were the spiritual society. Then when you reach phase 3 and phase 4, then there's suddenly secrets and things that you can't tell your associates in spiritual society, because you have a higher perception than them, and you have to respect them, and you can't just tell them of something that you've known because you've reached it from their perspective. The spiritual society is the highest degree there is, and they don't know of a higher degree than in spiritual society. So there's a huge difference between when you're in a phase and when you're managing it from a higher phase.
Okay.
Just like when you reach the spiritual society, you suddenly had to deal with humanity differently. You couldn't just go to them and start saying to them, oh yeah, the wisdom of Kabbalah, you just have to learn it, we need to do the connection. You had to sort of know when to talk about humanity issues with humanity, and know when to talk about spiritual society issues with the spiritual society.
Exactly. What does make someone grows his perception so fast between, let's say 2.4 to 4 in the phase, phase 4?
Cleaning concepts. That's what we do. The idea of cleaning concepts, it's not that the cleaning concepts itself is what advances you. The cleaning of concepts allows you to accept for your subconscious to reveal to you another layer within it. So the whole path from, when we consciously can deal with this, which is normally 2.2, before the barrier, spiritual society phase, the mutual guarantee phase, what moves you forward is not the cleaning concepts directly, but by cleaning concepts, you basically allow your subconscious to reveal to you 2.3, and then reveal to you 2.4, and then reveal to you 3.1 and 3.2, and so forth, all the way to end of correction. Right? So the cleaning concepts is what allows you to say, yeah, okay, I can handle this now, give me another shot. Right? And it's like that acceptance, and the cleaning of concepts in your consciousness allows you to accept, saying, okay, tell me more about myself, reveal some more immaturity, some more evil within me. And if someone's not cleaning concepts, then basically they're shutting themselves off and saying to their subconscious, look, I can't handle what I've got right now. What, you're going to give me another degree? They'll destroy me. And either the person will just be stuck there, which we call plateau, or he'll fall into a shell and actually digress into a lower phase, which means he'll act like a lower phase. So he's actually in that lower phase, but he's acting like a lower phase because he's terrified and scared and not using the environment correctly to actually clean his concepts, to able to allow his subconscious to reveal to him another layer within him.
In what way we can use the group and the environment to enhance?
So the idea is that not always is a person able to understand and know what they need to clean. So the idea is that you've got, the materials, let's say the articles and stuff, and they'll, give you a general overview. But when there's two kinds of layers of concepts. There's concepts which are phase concepts of the group, and then there are concepts which are of the phase of individual. What are the difference between the two? The group concepts are concepts that everyone needs to know, right? Like what is bestowal, what is love, what is egoism, how are we meant to advance, what are the differences between the phases, how does spiritual society handle things, how does humanity handle things? All the information that pertains to anyone is in the group phase. Then you've got concepts that need to be cleaned which are pertaining to you as an individual. That means that you might be having issues with, your specific family, with your specific job. There's certain events that you went through, traumatic events that are stopping you from accepting yourself. Then those concepts that need to be cleaned are more specific to you. They're more dealing with your specific case, and that you actually clean with an individual and not with a group. If you come to the group and start telling all your secrets, with your family of, what's happening in your family, that you do with the individual. You have a chosen individual, or you have, you either have the individual working with, or you have someone who's, like higher, that you're allowing them to be be your individual for that particular concept to clean. And you clean that private information and clean that private concept with that individual. And you don't do it in a group setting normally.
Being vulnerable to the individual.
Exactly. So you have to be vulnerable to the group to clean general concepts, and then you have to be vulnerable to the individual to clean more specific concepts of your specific situation. And normally the group cleaning concepts is enough. And then there's certain situations where you need a bit more detail and you need more help individually, and then you're meant to actually go to the individual and do that with them. So even when you're working with your individual, there are two layers that you could be working with your individual. You can either be using your individual like the group phase. You're just working one-on-one, and let's read another article and see what each other thinks of it. So you're basically working in a group phase with your individual. And then you've got working with your individual as an individual, and then you're sharing private information. You have to have trust and confidence and work with them accordingly.
So, Zakai, without the group, it's very difficult, to advance through this phase, right? Or someone just reading, articles and, stuff like that. They can advance,
Well, they can advance until they reach a concept that requires more detail. So it basically depends on the person. If a person is strong enough to not be scared of revealing any kind of gunk or evil or immaturity within them, and they have no problem, and they're like, give it to me, give me the next degree, and they actually, not just saying it, but actually they are on a level that they can actually do that, then they could actually advance the entire way by themselves. The problem is that most people aren't very strong. Even though they might think they're strong, they're not very strong. And they actually need others to help them, like the group and the individual. Let's continue. Before the barrier.
Before the barrier, Balaha Salam. Behina Shorus, root phase, and the Behina Dalet, phase 4, clothed in the light of Keter, crown, and the 10 Sephiroth emanations. Behina Aleph, phase 1, and Behina Dalet, phase 4, clothed in the light of Hakma, wisdom, and the 10 Sephiroth emanations. Behina Bet, phase 2, and are clothed the light of Bina, understanding. Bina Gimel, phase 3, and her clothed the light of Teferet, beauty. And her own Behina phase clothed the light of Malhut, kingdom. Hence, even now, after the first restriction, when Behina Dalet, phase 4, has been banned from being a vessel of reception, the 5 discernments of Aviut, coarseness, in her are named after the 5 Sephiroth phases, Keter, Hakma, Bina, Teferet, and Malhut, crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom. Explanation. The root phase in the phase 4 closed light of crown, preparation, and the 10 emanations. The first phase in the phase 4 closed the light of wisdom, humanity, and the 10 emanations. The second phase in phase 4 closed the light of understanding, spiritual society. The third phase in phase 4 closed the light of beauty, group. And phase 4 closed the light of kingdom, individual. Hence, even after the barrier, first restriction, when phase 4 is disabled from being the phase of perception, the 5 parts of attraction, coarseness, in it are named after the 5 phases: crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom.
Preparation. Explanation. The root phase in phase 4 closed the light of crown, preparation, in the 10 emanations. Okay, so we're going to be dealing with the first phase, which is the phase of preparation. So the phase we're dealing with, the phase in phase 4, is Bechinat Shoresh, the root phase, which is also called Keter and crown. And this manages the phase called Hachana, which is preparation. And in this phase of preparation, we have 5 parts. We have Machshevet HaBriyah, which is the thought of creation. And this is dealing with all the issues of the goal of where egoism is going and the world is going, and sort of what is the overall plan of, why we exist, and all that kind of stuff is managed in the thought of creation. Then you have manifestations of that thought of creation, which break up into 4 parts. You've got Domem, which is the still degree, which are basically planets, water, and land. You've got Someach, which is vegetative, which are plants and trees. You've got the animate, right, which is actually Chai, which are animals, mammals, and fish. And then we've got speaking, which is Medaber, which is humanity.
So this is how the root phase manages through phase 4?
So the root phase in phase 4 manages all these parts in the generality. So for example, when you're going down to the forest and going next to a pond and there's fish there. So the root phase within the phase 4 is managing all these parts. It's managing those parts of your perception. We're dealing with parts of our conscious perception. So what deals with your conscious perception is that root phase within phase 4.
Okay, thank you.
which is basically managing all the preparation for dealing with humans.
And that's in our subconscious, isn't it?
No, this is all our consciousness. We're dealing with our consciousness. We're not dealing with our subconscious.
Okay.
We're dealing with parts that you can actually identify. You can't identify parts in your subconscious, but you can identify parts in your consciousness.
So these are parts of our world that we view consciously as we go through the day.
Exactly.
And that's controlled by Bahina Shoresh.
Exactly.
Okay.
We'll move on. Humanity. The first phase in phase 4 closed the light of wisdom. Humanity in the 10 emanations. So the phase in phase 4 that we're doing now, which is Bechinat Aleph, which is the first phase, Chochmah and wisdom. And what it manages is Enoshut, which is humanity. And we're going to have 5 sets of desires that we're dealing with. We've got the root, which is pregnancy desires, which is dealing basically from conception to birth. Then we've got the base desires, which is food, sex, and family. Business desires, money, honor, and knowledge. Religious desires, which is physicalized spirituality. And finally, Kabbalah desires, Kabbalistic knowledge. And when we're going through all these phases, these can be seen in the articles. Apart from the root phase, it's basically you can see in the articles of system concepts, articles 30 to 37, in system concepts, volume 1. So unlike with the preparation, where it's basically all the building blocks, right? You've got still, vegetative, animal, and speaking. This is now dealing with the different relationships you have with different parts of humanity. Because with the still, vegetative, and animal, we don't actually break them down. So what we break down is we break down the humanity desires. And in humanity here, we're dealing with the basic blocks. So we've got pregnancy desires, which is dealing of the whole concept of how you came into this world physically, right? Then you've got the base desires, which a baby starts to, after it's been born, then it starts to build these desires within it. First as a desire for food, and then it builds a desire for sex, and then a desire for family. And then it layers on top of that another level of desires, which are business desires, which are for money, honor, and knowledge. And then if he gets a passive point in the heart, then he goes to the religious desires, which are for physicalized spirituality. And this includes mysticism and religion, because basically religion is taking Kabbalistic knowledge and states of perception and physicalizing them into actions that you do with your hands and legs. And finally, you've got the Kabbalah desires, which is dealing with the Kabbalistic knowledge. So for example, someone who is in the Kabbalah desires, they might get a kick out of analyzing the beautiful numerology and scripture, and look how the language of the Kabbalist is just so beautiful and artistic, and really getting a so-called spiritual high from feeling the words that the Kabbalists are using. It's got nothing to do with real spirituality, because they're not actually going through states of perception, but they feel like it must be spirituality, since the body of knowledge they're dealing with was written by people in spirituality. So it must be that if they're feeling the artistic words of Kabbalist, it must be that they're feeling now spiritual sensations. So unlike with the physicalized spirituality, where a person gets a spiritual high from doing physical actions, Kabbalah desires a person gets a fake spiritual high from dealing with already the spiritual knowledge of the Kabbalists.
But in Kabbalah desires is also using they practice כאילו דברים מוחשיים, מעשיים, כמו like Berg and
So burgers in the religious desires, it's physicalized spirituality when you're dealing with things like red strings and holy waters and things like that. That's dealing with the religious desires. Since you're physicalizing, you're saying water is chasadim, which is mercy, and therefore, if you drink, holy water, if you're drinking water, which is, said, let's say, good things on it, and therefore it's holy water, or it was made in a certain place, therefore you will get mercy. You'll become merciful. And that's not true, right? You can drink as much water as you want. You won't become more merciful. Even Hitler drank water. And you could have given Hitler holy water and he still would have done what he did. It's got nothing to do with it. So it's taking a spiritual concept and giving it a physical manifestation, because that's what people are used to. People are used to physicality. So you take spiritual stuff and you say, oh, this is spiritual, right? So they get a spiritual sort of so-called high from it, but only if they're able to sort of tell me what to do. It's like, normally when you talk to people about concepts, their first response is, okay, so what do I do? It's like, no, it's not, you're not doing anything. Do you understand the concept? Do you internalize it? Do you feel it? Do you scrutinize it? Do you understand the intricacies of it? That is what you need to work on, not what do I do with my hands and legs. And people, the tendency, what do I do? What do you see?
I said not manifesting the thoughts to actions, to work with hands and legs, like.
And that's what religious desires do, right? They want, like, tell me what to do. Tell me what to wear.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to fight the evil eye. Oh, you tell me I wear a red string? I feel great now. It's like they need something physical to do. They need symbols. They need to, and even if they're told it's a symbol, they actually treat it not as a symbol. They treat it as the thing itself. It's like, if I remove the symbol, oh, evil eye will affect me. I put the symbol on, oh, evil eye won't affect me. So it's no longer a symbol. They actually think of it. It actually has spiritual, mystic powers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is dealing with any, spiritual group out there that sort of physicalize and require you to do actual physical actions of any sort to get any kind of spiritual high.
So this phase is basically the phase of how we're relating to each other and the world and society around us.
Dealing more with the material part, you could say.
Yeah, the corporeal.
Yeah, the corporeal. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The corporeal manifestation you're dealing with. You've got the first two parts, which are just corporeal, in itself, like pregnancy, the base desires and business desires. And then you have on the other half of it, which is the religious and Kabbalah, which is already sort of dealing with the high level of the spiritual society, but in its backside. So it's dealing with the physicalized version. It's like, I'm so used to physicality. Oh, you're talking about spirituality? Let's physicalize it. And we're not talking about like whether you should do it or not. I'm religious and some of you aren't. And that there's sort of, you basically go by the framework you're born into. Just like, if someone's Catholic or someone's Islamic or whatever it is, you keep the framework you're basically born into in your society, and you focus on dealing with higher desires and not constantly trying to deal with, should I be doing this or that? By actually spending energy on what you should be doing, you're actually in that phase. So, for example, if someone's trying to reject religion, they're still in the religious desires. It's like Bala Salam says that whether you believe in the Creator or defy him, not believe in him, and thinking about it, both of them are thinking about the Creator. It's the same.
It's a good example of two opposites being the same thing, a singularity, right?
Yeah, it's like if someone loves money or hates money, they're both dealing with money. If someone loves honor or hates honor, they're both dealing with honor. So he's like, I hate honor. It's like, no, you don't. It's like, what do you mean? I hate it. I write all these posts on Facebook of how terrible it is. Yeah, but you're dealing with it all the time. So you get it. Your enjoyment is from dealing with the honor degree. And whether it's positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. It's not that you are where your thoughts are. You are where your desires are. Let's move on. Spiritual society. The second phase in phase 4, close the light of understanding, spiritual society. So now we're dealing with Bechina Bet, the second phase, Bina, understanding, and that manages the Chevra Uchanit, the spiritual society. And in the spiritual society, there are 5 sub-phases. So you've got the root phase, which is overcoming desires, awareness of natural inclination to receive. Then you've got connection desires, which is mutual positive interaction. Mutual guarantee desires, which are mutual responsibility. Obstinate desires, self-victimization towards advancement. And then cleaning desires, redefining concepts with mature discernments. So with the root of overcoming, this is when you have awareness of, oh, we were born with the will to receive, the Creator is the will to bestow, and we need to overcome our natural inclination to receive and to bestow to reach adhesion with the Creator. And that's the root phase. That's sort of what drives the entire spiritual society, is that overcoming desire. Then it's built into a few parts. You've got the first part you do when you come into the spiritual society is you start dealing with connection desires, which is mutual positive interaction. So for example, you don't share the negative feelings that you feel towards each other. You only share the positive feelings, and you share them in a general way, because the idea is you want to overcome the ego. So you don't want to make someone feel good in their ego. You want to make them feel good that they're with you towards the same goal, and not giving them any enjoyment of their current state of their ego. And that's in the connection desires. Then you upgrade it to sort of a more serious degree, and that's the mutual guarantee desires. That's when you start taking mutual responsibility. So you're not just giving positive emotional interaction with each other. Now you're actually taking normally a position in the society. You're doing things for each other. For example, you're managing the finances of the group, or you're cleaning the building, cleaning the toilets, cutting vegetables in the kitchen, managing Excel sheets, all different things like that, that you're sort of taking responsibility. You're not only just coming to emotionally support each other in a general way, you're actually taking responsibility. It's like, I actually, do something in the group which is very important. Then you start reaching the desires dealing with the next degree of the group phase. And the first part is the darkness of it, which is the obstinate desires. And that's when you have self-victimization towards advancement. This is when the society no longer gives you a standard pseudo-spiritual high. But so you're basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, you are so used to the spiritual society and you want to stay there, but it's no longer giving you sustenance. And then you basically fall into self-victimization, where you blame the group or you blame yourself, and you basically just live on that blame, and you're not actually cleaning concepts. And you might be hearing concepts, and you might be thinking you're cleaning concepts. You're just constantly like in that fear aspect, and you're constantly like scared of, and always finding faults in the concepts to sort of, so what happens at end of correction? Is this going to happen? Oh, that happens? Oh, then I wouldn't want to advance. And you always find the reasons why. And when you can't advance, but you're not getting sustenance from the spiritual society anymore. And then finally, you have cleaning desires, where you actually are actively redefining your concept with mature discernment. So you're understanding that you had an immature understanding of many concepts, and you're starting to change them intellectually, at least at the beginning, to new definitions. So you might have thought beforehand that love is, loving someone unconditionally and giving to them and not giving to yourself. And then you understand that's an immature concept, because you're basically going to remove all your energy and become empty. And the real definition of love, when we say the Creator loves us, and loving as a parent, is when you control the person 100%, but you give them the illusion of free will. So for example, when you love your children, you control their environment, you control what they eat, where they learn, what they can play with, and so forth. But you give them the illusion that they can actually do whatever they want. And that's the same concept of the Creator. The Creator loves us, which means he controls us 100% and gives us the illusion that we can do whatever we want. For example, Bnei Baruch would be a correct example of a spiritual society. While the Kabbalah Center is more in 1.3, they're dealing with the religious desires. They're sort of, the Kabbalah is in between 1.3 and 1.4, between the religious desires and the Kabbalah desires. They're sort of connecting to the Kabbalistic name and a bit of its knowledge, but then they mostly reduce it to physical interactions and behaviors.
Do you think that the people in the Kabbalah Center have points in the hearts, or is it just, it's a mix? Who knows, right?
So, many of them, so anyone who's dealing with that sort of, that moving forward, you could say, sort of, spirituality, they have a point in the heart. Passive, it's a passive point in the heart, and it's very small, preparative form, but they still have a point in the heart.
Well, I feel like that may be true, and I feel like people sort of get awakened and then they fall back to sleep again, and then years go by, and like they've been awakened at some point, but then they don't really continue moving forward, and they just kind of go to sleep. Like
they don't grow it. Well, they just plateau it. They don't grow it. They don't move to the next degree of it. They just stay with what it gives them. That initial feeling of, I need to find meaning. Like a passive point in the heart is, what is the meaning of life? Your life is still terrible, but now I know why it's terrible. And that knowing of why it's terrible makes me feel better without actually improving anything.
But then there's other people that may be just sort of seeking knowledge of Kabbalah and stuff like that.
And then a point in the heart.
Yeah, they don't even have a point in the heart. They're just reading books for knowledge, like philosophy or something like that, you know?
Exactly, or they're just liking the honor of like managing people and stuff like that.
Maybe that's like like a 1.2 desire. They're not even...
Exactly. And you can have the same thing in Bnei Baruch, where you'll have people that don't have points in the heart. You have people which have a passive point in the heart. You'll have people that have a active point in the heart, and so forth.
How can you stay in Baruch with an active?
What?
How can you stay in Baruch with an active point of the heart?
Well, the idea is that you have to manage all the phases. So even when you come to a group, to come to the group phase, you understand that the phase 2 needs some sustenance. So it doesn't mean that you have to actually go to the society and interact with people, since even the interaction mostly with phase 2 is passive anyway, but you might continue listening to the lessons of the Rav and stuff like that. Each phase has an important part to play. So for example, while phase 3 might clean concepts, you need to get dirty concepts. And dirty concepts you get from the spiritual society. And it doesn't mean that the spiritual society itself will have dirty concepts, but the concepts that will give you are very vague and general, that they'll reveal the dirty concepts within you. They'll say things like, you know what bestowal is? It's love. And then you'll think, I know what love is. And you've got a totally immature perception of love. And then you come to the group and you're like, I'm doing bestowal because I love you all. And it's like, well, what's your definition of love? And you say, love is giving unconditionally to each other. And then the group will tell you, well, that's an immature understanding of that. And then they'll clean that concept for you. So if you didn't go to the spiritual society and get excited or sort of convey a concept then to the group, well, then you wouldn't have anything to clean. So it's like you get dirty clothes from the spiritual society and then you use the cleaning powder of phase 3.
No, that's okay. But for people but you said there might be people with an active point in the heart that still are in Bnei Baruch, not listening to the lessons.
Well, the idea is that if someone has an active point in the heart and they leave the society, they basically get stuck there because they fall into self-victimization towards advancement. So they'll spend their lives, blaming the society, but they won't actually move forward. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Okay, so people that have the desire to actually advance have to go out of the group and move on.
No, they need to stay in the spiritual society as much as they can. And so you'll find people, for example, that even though they have an active point in the heart and they're not getting sustenance from the spiritual society, they'll still stay there because they're used to it. And they've spent so many years there that they can't leave. So even though they're not getting sustenance from it, they basically just stay there.
Okay.
Just like you'll have people which will have a more advanced passive point in the heart, and they can't leave their religious ideals because they're just so invested in it. And it's not that they have to leave their religious ideals, but they can't, they feel like they're sort of going against it if they're dealing with something with a higher phase. Even though the higher phase is not negating the lower phase, it's hard for them to give it up. And the same thing with the group. Like some people, for example, they don't come to system concepts because they feel that they're, denying the spiritual society, they're invalidating, they're negating the spiritual society if they come to system concepts. And what they don't understand is that they're layers. If you come to system concepts, you continue going to the spiritual society, just like you continue managing humanity. And I'd say one of the problems when people go into the spiritual society, because they have this Boolean understanding of either this or that, they actually allow their humanity desires to disintegrate. They get divorced, they lose their jobs and stuff like that, because they don't understand that they have to manage both the humanity and the spiritual society. And the same with the group. You need to manage both your humanity, your spiritual society, your group, and your individual phases. And even when you cross the barrier, you have to just constantly layer new phases on top. And you can't just use one to replace another. They're non-replaceable. They stack on top of each other. And if you don't spend the time on keeping all of them managed, then basically one of them will not be balanced and will basically force you to have to deal with it at some point. You'll find people that are in the spiritual society and really enjoying themselves, and then suddenly they find their businesses are failing, and then they have to leave the spiritual society to deal with their businesses. While if they would have taken care of their business while being in the spiritual society and not getting lost in the spiritual society, they could have kept both going. But because they had this Boolean thing of either this or that, they could either deal with humanity or move to spiritual society and then allow their humanity to be destroyed until the point that they actually return to it, and then they felt they could no longer be in the spiritual society.
Yeah, we can see a lot of people breaking and ruling their physical life.
Yeah, because they don't understand that it's a stack, that you have to manage both of them. And it's because they have an immature concept of the phases. They don't know about the phases. So from their perspective, they think that if you're in the spiritual society, that's it. That's all you need to deal with, and it will cover all the flaws of humanity. And that's not true. You have to manage both of them. And those that manage them survive longer, and those that don't, they break at some point.
Even though you can hear the rap says, you have to keep your job, you have to, but still, many of the people there will get divorced. So
well, the problem is that when the Rav says it, he says it in a general way. It's not repeated. It's not put importance on it. So then they hear Rav saying, "Oh, you have to keep your family," and then they go to their wives and not give them time, and basically, they get divorced because of negligence. So it's like a lot of what happens is because Rav talks in a very general way, people don't hear him. It's like he can say whatever he wants. People only hear the parts they want to hear. So when they talk about that you have to use your egoism, everyone laughs. It's like, yeah, you have to use your egoism. And then they don't use their egoism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so crucial to clean concepts, because when you clean your concepts, then you understand the phases. You understand, I'm going to take care of humanity. The system didn't give humanity just as a stepping stone to reach the spiritual society. You have to manage that stepping stone. The idea of spiritual states is that they stack on top of each other and they never replace each other. And they exist, all of them, and they're just adding one on top of each other. So even when you cross the barrier, you still have to manage all these desires that you've got before the barrier as well. And if you don't give any of them the rightful need, well, then you're gonna be out of balance. It's like as an adult, you still have to eat. You still have to have your family. You still have to have sex. You still then also have to handle money, honor, and knowledge. Like someone says, I don't care about knowledge. It's like, no, you do. You have to. You would care if someone at work would be degrading you and making you feel unimportant. It's like you're getting all your money. Why are you upset? It's like, oh, you hurt my feelings. What? I thought you don't care about honor. So you find people that constantly say, I don't care about money, but then they don't understand why they don't get raises. They don't care about honor, but then they get hurt when people, say that they're worth nothing. And they get jealous of other people's knowledge, but they don't really care about knowledge. So it's like, you do care about all of them, and you have to manage them accordingly. Let's move along. Group. The third phase in phase 4, close the light of beauty group. So we're dealing now with Bechina Gimel, the third phase, Tiferet, beauty. And this is dealing with the Kvutza, the group. And under this managed phase, we've got 5 subphases. So we've got the root phase, which we call it the goal setting desires, which is defining the goal of becoming the creator. And then once you define that goal, then you've got the phases of the first phase, which is targeted desires, which is focusing efforts on a definitive goal of becoming the creator. Then you've got the emotionalizing desires, where you start feeling sensations towards intellectual concepts. So the concepts that you've started to clean in 2.4, you start adding an emotional aspect to them in 3.2. And then the pain point desires, where you're revealing a root of immaturity. This goes with the concept of the classes, that there are 4 classes, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Yosef, that each person is born with that class. And the idea is that depending on your class, there's a different pain point. The pain point of Avram is that they lack a supporting environment, or they feel they lack a supporting environment. The pain point of Yitzchak is that they can't express themselves. The pain point of Yaakov is that they have problems with relations and possessions. And the pain point of Yosef is that they're constantly trying to validate themselves. And then you've got anticipation desires, where you have to have increased confidence towards your future state. This is when you're having anticipation that you understand what the solution is, which is to increase your egoism. And that's what you're going to be doing in phase 4. And the idea is that even though this is called the group phase, many people could think, oh, I'm in a group, so therefore I'm in the group phase. It's like, no, this is a group phase. The groups that normally people are in the spiritual society, for example, Nebruch, that's a group in the spiritual society phase. So the spiritual society manages those groups. The group phase is independent of the spiritual society. It's laid on top of the spiritual society. That means the spiritual society does not manage the group. And if it's managing your group, then you know that group is not a phase 2 spiritual society group. It's sort of, if they're managing it, you know it's a spiritual society phase group. And if they're not managing it, and you're still in a group which are dealing with cleaning concepts together, then you know it's a phase 3 group. And there are huge differences between the two. A phase 2 group won't be cleaning concepts. They'll just want that positive emotional interaction and a mutual guarantee of having different operations done. The phase 3 group, they deal with cleaning concepts. And the positive emotional interaction is just a result of it. And sometimes they'll talk about, bad situations and things that need to be corrected and stuff like that. And they won't always be so positive because it's a side effect. The main part of phase 3 group is not the positive mutual interaction, but rather the cleaning concepts.
And Zakai, here in the pain point desires, when we review the classes here, I had a friend that reads about classes, and they had this idea that the class is some kind of scene, and I try to explain that class is some kind of inclination, that people have. How the best way to explain classes,
Classes are prototypes of behavior. So the idea is that each person has a prototype of behavior that is then, it's like their base personality that then they use to express when they deal with their lives. So for example, the pain point, let's say of Avram, which is a supporting environment, because that is their pain point, that's what sort of activates them. So then everything that they're dealing with outside of them is always going to come back to that. Is it supporting my environment or not? That's the question they're constantly asking themselves subconsciously at the beginning, and then afterwards it becomes conscious. Is that person supporting me or not? Is that person supporting me or not? And that's what they live by. They feel they can grow if they're supported. And if they don't feel that they're supported, they don't feel they can grow. But then you have Yitzchak, for example, who doesn't actually care about other people. You might think, I'm Yitzchak and I do care, but later on you'll find out that he doesn't actually care about other people. And that's why Yitzchaks, for example, are nice to other people, just because they just don't really care about them and they prefer to just be nice to them to push them away. And what they're really focused is on themselves, but because they're focused on so much on themselves, they can't express themselves to others. So they want to say something and they say something different. They want to say something positive, and for some reason everyone thinks they're saying something negative. They're trying to say something negative. People actually is taking it great and they think they're saying something positive. They don't know how to express themselves correctly because they're sort of focused on themselves and they don't know how to deal with interaction between themselves and externality. Then you have Yaakov, which is pinpoint is basically external ownership of their possessions and relationships. And they constantly, because they're not aware of it, what they're constantly doing is they're trying to hold on to things and they actually try to suffocate them. And that's why they lose them. They try to hold on to their money and then they become poor. They try to hold on to their security of their relationship and they actually break up the relationship. They are so terrified of allowing somebody else to have freedom over them, so they never get married or they never get into a serious relationship because they're constantly trying to hold their externality and control it and manage it, and they're trying to because their sense of self is living in that kind of managing of reality. They get stuck there. And then you have Yosef, for example, their pinpoint is validation. So they're constantly trying to validate, are people correct or not? They believe in ethics and morals, and they're constantly fighting, how could that person do that to me? He was unethical. How could that person do that to me? That's immoral. And they're constantly trying to validate things, is he telling the truth or not? Did he lie to me? So, for example, you could have a situation where, let's say, a person is buying a certain electronic thing, and he's getting bad value, right? He thinks it's going to work, and he finds out it's not working, and he's not getting any any warranty on it. So he's basically paid for something and hasn't got the value. So each class will have a different response. Avram will feel like, oh, again, I've been used, and I'm not supported. So he's thinking of a supporting environment. Yitzchak will say, like, why wasn't I able to sort of like why wasn't I able to say to the person, like, why it's not working? It's like, I didn't break it. It was like that. And he starts constantly focusing on what he did wrong. And he feels bad, like, oh, if I would have said something different, then I would have got the warranty and I didn't do something right. And they're constantly focusing on themselves, on their expression. Then you have Yaakov. He's like, oh, I don't understand. I spent all that money. I lost money. Where's my money? He's thinking about his money. And then you've got Yosef. It's like, how could that company do that to me? They're, that is unethical of what they're doing. I should sue them. These are the problems with these companies, that they don't have value and they don't, that I can't trust that company anymore. So they're constantly dealing with the validation issue. Move on. Individual. And phase 4, in phase 4, close the light of kingdom. Individual. So we're dealing here with Bechina Dalet, the 4th phase, Malchut kingdom. And this is going to be managing the phase of Yichidei Gula, which is the individual. And this has, of course, 5 sub-desires as well. So we've got the root, which is called egoistic desires, which is focusing on self-love. That's the idea of growing your egos. And you understand that the solution to actually reach bestowal is actually to focus on self-love. It's like, but I thought the whole idea is to avoid self-love. It's like, yeah, but all you have is self-love. So you have to use self-love to reach love of others. And that's the root phase, the egoistic desires. Then when you stop focusing on self, then you reach doubt desires, which are deep scrutinies on the path. You get all different thoughts and emotions of, this is nonsense, how could this be? This doesn't match up with other things. And the idea is to, instead of using those as excuses of, I found problems in system concepts, it doesn't make sense, and therefore I'll stop. Rather, it's asking you to scrutinize and internalize and understand more deep meaning. Maybe I'm not getting this right. What more do I need to understand to internalize this concept, to make it my own concept? Because if we're focusing on self-love, that means even the concepts have to be mine. And I'm not living on concepts of others. I'm living on my own concepts, and I'm taking other people's concepts and making them my own by doing those deep scrutinies. Then you have responsibility desires, which is when you're owning the manifestation of our experiences, This is the idea of when we say that there's none else besides him, which means there's none else but the internal power within you. And the idea is that any situation that's happening to you since you were born until now, and even in the future, was always because you manifested those experiences. So it was never anybody else's fault. It is always you who's manifesting it. It's not your fault. There's no point sort of falling into, oh, it's my fault. I did that to that person. You were born that way. Those are your desires. But you have to understand that because they're a manifestation of your desires, if you work on your desires and correct your perception, you'll actually be able to change things along the way. And the idea is that's what you do in 4.2. You own the manifestation of your experiences. And then you have vulnerable desires, which is shedding the false pretense of bestowal. This is where you have to feel that you've never done anything bestowal in your life. Because if you're wanting the quality of bestowal, how can you want a quality if you think you already have it? Even in the smallest amount. Because if you already have it, even in the smallest amount, you're basically saying you have the quality already. Even if it's a small amount, but then you're not wanting the quality of bestowal, you're wanting more bestowal and not the quality. So if you're wanting the quality of bestowal, which is what the Creator's quality is, then you have to understand that you don't have that quality, and therefore any bestowal you've done until now is actually egoism. You thought it might be bestowal, but it's not. It's just egoism. So you have to actually go around life and externally behave exactly like you were before, but always consciously understand that you're doing it with egoistic intentions, and you're not actually doing it because you want to help others. You're only always doing it for your self-gratification. You have to feel that in that 4.3 phase. And then finally, in the elevated desires, which is 4.4, that's when you're accepting the potential, the full quota of work. This is when you're focusing on the future. You're like, okay, this is my entire area. These are all these desires before the barrier, that these are the desires I'm going to be dealing with after the barrier. And I'm going to be managing them and correcting them, my perception on them. And just accepting them so you can actually correct them after the barrier. So you're not going to correct them before the barrier. You're just going to accept them, that this is my workplace for my spiritual work.
In the root base, we need to focus on self-love, so we should focus on doing everything then through this whole phase 4 as something for just only ourselves.
Yeah, so you could say the root phase of phase 4 is saying that all these sub-phases are growing our focus on self-love. Now sort of dealing with another layer of our self-love. So you can say in the beginning it's your thoughts, which are the deep scrutinies. Then it's your emotions, which is only the manifestation of your experiences. Then it's the bestowal within you, the quality. And then finally it's acceptance. And we have read in the past, Balasalam's quote from one precept where he says that the way to true altruism is through excessive egoism.
So it's getting to the point of where you come to the realization and accept the fact that you're just an egotistical animal and that you don't want to be that. Then you just have to take and accept that that's what you are and work towards your next state, which is crossing the barrier or wherever you're at to the next degree.
And using what you are. So
Right.
if you are egoism, you have to use egoism to reach bestowal.
Exactly.
And it's so hard for people to understand it. Like, why would I want to use the quality that I don't like to reach the quality that I do like? Well, the problem is that you're going to have to use reception afterwards as well. So it's not like, even when you cross the barrier, and at the beginning your reception desires are actually a little disabled, but afterwards you go through phases where they're re-enabled and you have to actually deal with them. So there's no point in you sort of thinking, oh, once I cross the barrier and reach into correction, that's it, I have no reception anymore. It's like, no, Then end of correction is when you get to reveal all your parts of reception within you and all the parts of bestowal within you. And you're complete. You're perfect. You've got all those parts within you. That means that they're corrected, which means they're revealed. A corrected part is something that's revealed within you. And then you actually start working with those desires after end of correction. So if you don't accept your egoism, then you're just going to be half a person. And you need both the God within you and the human element within you as well.
So you're basically taking the God or the creator with you and egotistical desires that you have and creating your center line.
Exactly. You're wanting the right line, which is bestowal, using
Right.
the left line, which is egoism. And that creates a middle line.
Zakai, all the lights that are closed, they are lights of the kingdom, like it's beauty of kingdom and kingdom of kingdom, or I'm
Exactly.
not...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So kingdom of kingdom is Bechina Daled in Daled, which is fourth phase and fourth phase.
Because the light that comes to the Bechina Dalet is kingdom, and then it is divided between the subphases.
So the idea is that in each of the lights, there's sublights as well.
Okay.
Right? The idea is that each light matches the vessel. So light is reality, and it matches the perception that's going to deal with that reality accordingly.
Mhm. But it's written here in short, no, not no.
Exactly.
No.
Of course, there's also degrees to the scrutinies, and there's sub-degrees to the responsibility, and this is just dealing with the general understanding of it. We're basically dealing here with 125 lights corresponding to 125 vessels. Since we've talked here about 5 different phases, right? We talked about preparation, humanity, spiritual society, the group, and individual. And in each of them, there are 5 subphases. And then you have sub 5 phases within them, which we normally just name the 4 of them, which is unformed, chaos, darkness, and spirit. So when you're going through the doubt desires, you go through the unformed of doubt desires, then you go through the chaos of doubt desires, then the darkness of doubt desires, and then the spirit of doubt desires. And then you move on to the responsibility desires. So you basically got 125 phases before the barrier. There's 125 phases after the barrier until end of correction. So you've got 250 desires from when you're born, from conception, physical, corporeal conception, all the way to spiritual end of correction. Let's move on. 5 parts of attraction. Hence, even after the barrier, first restriction, when phase 4 is disabled from being the phase of perception, the 5 parts of attraction, coarseness in it, are named after the 5 phases: crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom. So the idea is that after the barrier, we no longer use Bechina Daled in Bechina Daled, which is phase 4 and phase 4, as our phase of perception. Rather, we use the screen that we've layered on top of it, which is hardness, and we take the coarseness of phase 4 and we include it into that hardness. And then we still call it by the same name. So we've got Keta, crown, which is Aviut Shorish, root coarseness within our screen, our masach. Then we've got Chochmah, wisdom, which is Aviut Aleph, phase 1. Bina, understanding, Aviut Bet, phase 2, right, of coarseness. Then we've got Tiferet, beauty, Aviut Gimel, phase 3 of coarseness. And then finally Malchut, kingdom, Aviut Daled, phase 4 of coarseness.
So this is at the point where you have the masak and the reflected light creates the rosh. and it becomes the reflected light becomes the final vessel, replacing Malhut.
Exactly. And we'll be talking more about the screen and the levels of coarseness and how they match with the hardness in future sessions.
What's in the screen? Well, first of all, Prenadal and Prenadal is the one on the bottom. The screen itself, that's above the Prina Aleph, you could say.
What do you mean?
Like, what's the deal? I know Prina Dalet and Dalet, that's restricted.
Right.
So where is the other ones? Prina Aleph, Prina Bet, Prina Gimel, where are they?
So the idea is that the screen expands, and that's how we believe in Bechina Aleph Bet and Gimel.
So that screen there, that concludes Bechina Aleph Bet and Gimel.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It expands. So here it's just showing the coarseness. It's not actually showing phases in Bechina Dalet.
So when the screen expands down from the pay, it is taking in all these other phases down to Bechina Dalet and Bechina Dalet.
Right, which is basically the tabor. So the screen expands from the peh to the tabor and clothes those phases within phase 4 and gives them the hardness, which basically gives them that inversion from reception to bestowal, from thinking that reality, from being reactive to reality to being active to reality, understanding that you caused what you're experiencing in reality. You're the creator of your experiences, not the receiver of the experiences. That's what the reflected light corresponds to. All right, I think we'll...
Before you leave, can you just run that last part by me again?
Which part?
The very last thing you were saying. The last little few sentences.
I got blank. Does anyone remember?
I don't. That's why I'm asking.
Moving from passive to active, no?
Oh, yeah, right. So the idea is that when you use your screen, without a screen, you're reactive to reality. And with a screen, you're active to reality. You're saying that I caused and manifested these situations. So, for example, if someone falls into a shell, right, it's like they lose their screen, which means that they then think that they're responding to reality and like, oh, they're poor things because, they had nothing to do with what happened. And they're just, poor receivers in reality. But when you have a screen, you actually have that confidence and that feeling of, I manifested that. I made that happen. I might not know why I made that happen, but it definitely made that happen.
Yeah, like yesterday, I hit the jackpot. I got a $300 ride in my cab, right? A nice long journey. So I manifested that. I've been desiring this, right? To have more money.
So the idea is that normally
That's how it would be.
The good things are easier for us to say, I made them happen. It's harder for us.
No, I accept the bad too, like I killed my computer.
Exactly.
Now it's to force me to upgrade to Windows 10, I guess.
Well, that's one way to get an upgrade.
I was forced.
By yourself.
But I lost all the videos, everything I had. I may be able to retrieve it, a tech may, I'll bring the computer, put it on an external.
I think we'll stop here and enter the after party.